Hey, welcome back to the first cup. Actually, I just poured some more. It's kind of the second cup right now. So, yes. I left this off with how I was explaining the creation of various businesses. Some are as basically as nonprofits to start out, but they'll be turned into for profits. Now, the idea is to create a massive, diversified, omni system that encompasses every possible need that we, vested members of the Republic, will require for us as stockholders to maximize our participation respective to our great land company, the Republic, which is supposed to promote our financial well being. So I'm very big on talking about this. Now, let me show you a little bit of other items right here, real quick. The discussion here is we're talking about basically quantifying everything in the Constitution respective to the constitutional framework as to ownership physics and economics, access to the Treasury, as to part of the original understanding laid out by our forefathers. So we're getting a whole bunch of economics and ownership physics as well as chronological order to understand certain types of laws and initial findings that are already standardized, for instance. Now we're having some small problems dealing with some of these items because there is a certain amount of problems with the system in itself missing documents. Of course, if you try to get a complete copy of the Constitution in the exact original words, it does not have it. The AI does not have it. It's also missing many other key documents. Now, surprisingly, it has a whole lot of the Marxist documents and communist documents, as well as, socialist documents. But again, those are all verified even by asking as foreign instruments, non-U.S. origin items. So we have to look at all the great land acquisitions and the understanding of the original deals of what was supposed to become eventually unlimited access to the United States Treasury and the lands that we were basically taking control of for those of us who are vested citizens. So the identification deals with different types of understanding respective to different other areas of law, respective to those of us who are vested citizens and how law protects our individual rights and procedures and ownership and other rights. Now, the thing is that there are some key problems that we're working on, and a lot of that deals with making new AIs that are going to be more accurate. Because the current problem is. Okay, so we're back here. I wanted to show you some samples of some of the material that I was working with. I talk about quantification. I do all these different quantification experiments. It's important to understand that we have all these massive overlapping laws to protect the chronological order of the acquisition of assets, for instance. Our personal property is our property. And the understanding that the entire system that we were creating to begin with is designed to run on what? No taxes. Taxes were something that were reserved for Congress primarily to deal with for emergency type situations. In other words, wars or whatever. We're in war, we don't have enough, we have to have the money, boom. The emergency taxes could be put on. There were also loan deals that were done that were really creative. You don't see many people talk about those. I want to talk about those more at another time because those are key creative. In other words, instead of taxes, it's as though a tax, but you get paid back. How about that? You get paid back. So there's that. Now, to also augment trade, that's where you have tariffs come in place to kind of tame the beast of commerce worldwide because other countries would try to take advantage on things. So we have to have the ability to, well, to fight back, so to speak. So that's why we have the tariff factors to try to be able to retame the situation and say, yeah, well, we just like to get everything back to an even kill where we're not going to tariff each other to death, or maybe not even at all, So there's that, So jumping back here into building back what was supposed to be built properly to begin with that did not fully occur. There are problems with this because we have a lot of different legal arguments as to how we had contracts on items and they did not manifest properly. And there's different reasons. We had a longevity rate of average of 38 years of age back in 1750. So keep in mind that we had a lot of people that were around as adults in 1780, 1790, that were not around for the 1812 war. They didn't live as long. Some people did. I mean, yes, some people, they got to live up there, but other people did not. It's very important. So, to give you a comparison, some people wonder about this. The longevity in the time of Christ was 33 years of age. That was the average longevity, statistically, of a human being. So you had to do everything in life within 33 years. And this is why you had ancient laws like nobody could ever be used as a slave more than 7 years. That was illegal. Ooh, you get in big trouble for that. So this is, these other things are of crucial importance. Now, today we have insanity. They want people to work 42 years before they can retire. And Social Security is all screwed up. Now, I will state that Roosevelt actually wanted to do different stuff with Social Security. And I'm also going to shock you. I'm going to tell you something that there were times where he was remarking that he did not like socialists. How about that? But because there were so many socialists in New York that had to be dealt with, he let his wife deal with them. Most of the time, his wife was dealing with them. So the problem with the trends respective to that era, when dealing with socialism, we also have to encompass foreign instruments coming from Europe. It's crucially important to understand this. So we're talking about other governments' spy money negatively influencing the United States, respective to the making of laws, the making of deals. You also have the oligarch factors. You had the Royal German Empire that was in multiple financial partnerships. In other words, many types of syndicates, different groups. They usually went 50-50 on most everything they did. Infiltrating because they wanted to get a hold of territory to put chemical plants, various type of companies, corporations, to be able to build munitions safely in a remote land where they wouldn't have to worry about the security about it, basically. And sadly, this ends up translating out into munitions being used to kill our own people in World War I. That was quite a controversy. Okay, enough of that for the moment. There's a lot of serious history there another time. So I'm trying to focus on our financial well-being and the original agreements, because let me just give you the standpoint from today. Here, now, today. We're looking back across history, our origins, when we're dealing with understanding us as a republic, us as stockholders, us as the bosses. The bosses, again, government servants are temporary. We elect them. The contest is based upon, it's supposed to be based upon who has the best proposals for new economic stimulus to further forward our financial well-being. In other words, concepts like we just going to go uptown and jack the rich folks because they got it, those are illegal. Those are illegal concepts. And many of the taxes we have all over the country are also illegal. They violate the contracts. Very important to understand, they're illegal. So They're not constitutional. So if we jump back to the era with basically Roosevelt, you had a lot of people that did not have the most optimum educational opportunities, nor did we have the most optimum number of agents investigating foreign spies. This was kind of a hard thing to do back then, in the late 1800s, early 1900s. So a lot of the statistics and information did not immediately surface. It takes many years for data to end up getting discovered and surface to understand how the Royal German Empire, which, by the way, had virtually nothing to do with the German people. It's kind of strange how that worked, because they were a European exploitation series of multiple syndicates, which included them also financially making to control various types of child mechanisms, organizations such as Marxism, communism, socialism, etc. So they also did various types of business territory. They did a bunch of oligarchic type stuff. And they did master manipulations, master spying and master propaganda, master bribery, all kinds of stuff. And they hit the United States. The United States was the number 2 target, and Russia was number 1. But the difference in targeting understanding for the United States was we were a vast, remote area, and they couldn't possibly handle dealing with the entire size of the United States and deal with Russia. Russia was the more immediate problem. So that's why they gave a bunch of money to Lenin to overthrow Russia. And they sent 3,700 black ops guys. Huge commitment to send these very skilled, special trained troop spies slash experts. They're very diversified experts. It's very interesting what they did when you find records on it. But the understanding there was it was 50-50. In other words, these people that Joseph Stalin murdered, these tens of millions of people, they took their lands, but they also took all their assets, and they wanted currency. So they basically took these assets and they shipped them worldwide. Most of it went through what was already established intelligence and commerce routes that the Royal German Empire and their syndicate partners had already established. So these go worldwide. And then we had a lot of assets that ended up appearing in New York, a whole lot of antiques and valuables and jewelry and paintings, all kinds of stuff that came from Russia, where they were murdered, basically. Anyhow, enough of that for right now. But the getting back to our situation, so as we to quantify where we're supposed to be at and understand all of these other cross-supportive viewpoints that exist in law, that have existed in law, and how they cross-support all this other stuff. Because we have super spydom that poisoned America, that did propaganda for various reasons, various ways to deceive people, distract people, spend peanut money distracting people, get them involved as though they're involved in some kind of grassroots campaign, but they're being used as pawns. They're being puppeted. This is what the Royal German Empire was doing in certain areas to be able to get control of what they wanted for what? Financial gain, for profits. So here we have the United States being victimized, and many leaders were bribed to change laws that never should have been changed about our personal rights. I mean, no one was ever supposed to take our rights to grow herbs in the backyard. If you want to make aspirin, that's your business. If you're dying of cancer, and you're a pauper and you have no money for quality medicine, it's your right to grow poppies in the backyard and make your own opium. You're in horrible pain. You're dying of cancer. I wouldn't belittle anybody of decency respective to that area. I would show respect. So anyhow, there's a lot of things where we're supposed to be trusted to do our own thing, to police ourselves, so to speak. So by the way, we're also expected to be knightly. We're expected to be somewhat noble and decent, and there obviously are laws in the books that are generalized that cover that predate. But it's important to also know some other things. We never surrendered our right to basically militia. Never surrendered that. We never surrendered our rights to make courts, that would keep our militias in control, discipline, as well as courts to deal with community problems. We would do this. We would have to muster up and deal with rebellions and different various problems, and we'd also have courts that way. The idea behind our creation constitutionally to create a judicial system is to relieve us of at least some of those burdens. In other words, to give us an option to say, gee, we would rather just do this through the federal system. Let's just go ahead and do it this way, and it will free us up from the burden of doing these things. But we never sacrifice the right. So this is one of the things the Constitution. There's nothing in the Constitution that says we're sacrificing any of our rights. Once again, we're the stockholders, we're the owners, we're the bosses. Okay, public servants are public servants. It's temporary positions they're elected to. Okay, so many people, we expect people to step up to the plate to do a good job, to basically help us into max production and continue our financial well-being increasing. That's what it's all about. So colonial constitutional capitalism, actually colonial capitalism being constitutionalized, is what we did making the Constitution. We are endorsing colonial constitution. So now we have colonial constitutional capitalism as a new label, and we've made this. This is supposed to be us, which is not compatible with Marxism, communism, or socialism, which were created as child mechanisms, literally human weapons, human devices. These corporations are humanized devices to be wielded literally as weapons of mass destruction. That's why the Royal German Empire created them. That's why they threw all of these many, many millions and billions of dollars into it. The equivalent that Lenin got today would be about $4.5 billion to begin his journey to overtake Russia, plus 3,700 black ops people. Now, if we retranslate the 3,700 into today's modern terms, that would be the equivalent of 330,000 plus troops. If you can imagine that, we'll start out with, here you go. It's a $4.5 billion. Oh, here's 330,000 troops, basically with specialized agents, go around on a rampage and, steal everybody's stuff, grab with both fists. And we want half of the take. That's what they did back then. So that's how that would translate out into a modern scalability if you rescaled it. So, understanding this. So, but Russia actually developed far more. You'd have to readjust those scales a little bit. Anyhow, let me try to track back to what's important. What's important that I wanted to track on today is certain key items. And among those key items, we deal with political powers, political options, voter options. Now, there's a difference, by the way, between those of us who are vested citizens versus people who are immigrants, people who are in a contract as a indentured servant, which you really don't see those. They've kind of banned those. There were certain reasons people were, taken advantage of. But some of the contracts were very lucrative. They're very, very good. And of course, we banned slavery. And I'd have to say rightfully so. There's no, slavery was always distasteful. It's not something to do to human beings. But the understanding of vestation has people in the world being different. We of the people making the new republic we're redoing are public. We, as a public, are the colonial community capitalist. Okay, that is not all the people in the rest of the world. There's a serious problem with people that have butchered words into meaning that public somehow means that everybody in the world gets to see stuff. No, it doesn't. That's never what it meant. And there were other labels. Let me say this again for those who might be so. There were other labels for who people were. Before God and all we proclaim. So there was a lot of other people in all that were not the public, which was us in the Republic, the vested citizens. So this is something, people are missing, and that we have to stop this butchery of language, by the way, because there's a translation problem. They don't translate things out properly in modern terms because some of the people doing the work on the translation are socialist and communist and Marxist. They have no right to participate. They're not welcome to participate because they are not loyal to the Constitution of the United States, which is an endorsement of colonial capitalism being constitutionalized. So this is a big, huge problem. So, in other words, if you have to swear an oath to the Constitution, and then you're going to run around and saying, "Oh, well, I'm a socialist," and that's not legit. That's not legit. The only reason that Roosevelt did it is because the infiltrations were so massive and deep on the heavy amounts of money. Let me say this again: the heavy, major amounts of money spent on propaganda in the United States by the Royal German Empire and their syndicate partners, so that they could acquire, in many cases, exclusive rights in certain areas to mining, to the making of chemicals, to for weapons, munitions, etc., other things, to pharmaceuticals. So it's crucially important to understand this.